Stop. Put the phone down. Actually, pick it back up because what I'm about to tell you cannot wait. You updated your bio, you changed your name spelling, you thought you were stepping into a new era, and then Facebook handed you a 2009 photo like a caseworker sliding evidence across a table. That moment felt personal because it was personal, not in the warm, fuzzy nostalgia way, in the algorithmic surveillance way. Because since early 2025, a system buried inside Facebook's infrastructure has been running a quiet, continuous comparison between who you are presenting yourself as right now and who you have ever been. Every version, every phase, every era you thought you left behind. It is called the Identity Continuity API, and sources familiar with Meta's internal architecture describe it as less of a feature and more of a mirror that refuses to let you look away. It does not care about your rebrand. It is not impressed by your new name spelling. It has 847 tagged photos that say otherwise. 847. That is not a rounding error. That is a curated archive. Photos you were tagged in at house parties. Photos uploaded by people you no longer follow. Photos from accounts that have been deactivated for years. The people gone, but the data? Still very much present. Still cross-referenced. Still yours in the eyes of the system. And here is the rehook you need to sit with. You did not give permission for this comparison to happen. There is no notification, no toggle, no settings page that reads, "Allow Facebook to measure how much you have actually changed." It is running in the background right now, while you eat, while you sleep, while you carefully curate a bio that reflects who you are in 2025. The mechanism works like this. Every time you make a significant profile change, name update, bio rewrite, new profile photo, header image swap, a flag is triggered. That flag initiates a background process that pulls your current aesthetic data and runs it against your historical tag graph. Think of your tag graph as a permanent shadow that has been following you since the day you made your account. Your shadow knows about the My Chemical Romance phase. Your shadow has receipts from the Tumblr to Facebook migration. Your shadow remembers every interest you once listed as a core personality trait and then quietly removed when you decided you had outgrown it. The algorithm read that deletion as data. Absence is information. Removal is a signal. Now here's where it gets structural. According to people familiar with the system's design, your current profile is not a single file. It is a layered architecture. And sitting inside that architecture, inaccessible through any standard navigation, is a folder. It has been described internally, and this language is reportedly real, as a repository for pre-opinion identity data. The public-facing name allegedly is something far more cutting. Who you were before you got opinions, that is the name. And whether that label originated as internal developer shorthand or something more deliberate, the implication is the same. The system has decided there is a version of you that existed before your current worldview, your current aesthetics, your current identity, and it has been filing evidence there ever since. Rehook, 3 billion users, 3 billion people who updated a bio, changed a photo, started a new chapter, and have absolutely no idea that somewhere inside the platform they are still logged into, a folder exists with time-stamped evidence of every version they tried to move past. 3 billion people who think their new profile is a blank page. It is not. The memory feature is the visible surface of something much deeper. When Facebook resurfaces your 2009 photo on the exact day you changed your name spelling, that is the Identity Continuity API completing a loop. It is the system acknowledging the delta, the gap between who you were and who you are claiming to be, and deciding to surface it. Not randomly, relationally, because the algorithm detected instability in your identity signal. Instability is not a glitch to this system. Instability is the trigger. 3 bio changes in 1 month is not someone finding themselves. To the Identity Continuity API, 3 bio changes in 1 month is a pattern. And patterns, this significant prompt escalated cross-referencing, deeper archive pulls, older photos, more specific timestamps. The algorithm goes further back the more you try to move forward. There are people who have experienced this firsthand and described it as uncanny. You change something significant about how you present yourself online, and within days, sometimes hours, Facebook begins serving memories that feel less like nostalgia and more like a rebuttal. Like the platform is saying, we see you trying. We also see everything that came before this. And the cruelest design detail, if it is intentional, is that you cannot opt out of what you cannot see. The folder does not appear in your activity log. It does not show up in your data download. Meta's own privacy tools, when you use them, return a version of your data that researchers describe as a curated summary, not the full architecture. The shadow does not come with a settings page. Rehook. Here is what we know, here is what is alleged, and here is what 3 billion people deserve to be asking out loud. If a platform can decide that your 2025 identity is close enough to your 2009 identity, that it should surface a photo from 15 years ago the week you try to rebrand, what exactly does Facebook think identity is? And more importantly, who gave them the authority to decide when yours has changed enough? What we are going to do in this documentary is follow the architecture. We are going to trace how the Identity Continuity API reportedly came to exist, what it was originally designed to do, and how its function expanded into something that touches every single rebrand, every single name change, every single moment someone tries to close a chapter on this platform and start the next one. We are also going to go inside the hidden folder. Not metaphorically. We have spoken to people who have seen what is reportedly stored there, the categories, the timestamps, the specific types of content being classified as pre-opinion identity data. And when we show you what they described, you are going to understand why this has never been announced, why there is no blog post, why there is no toggle. Some features are not features. They are just facts about what the system does. Your emo phase is not the point. Your emo phase is the entry point. Because if the system is doing this with aesthetic data from 2009, the question investigators and researchers are now asking is, how deep does the cross-referencing actually go? Political opinions you have publicly updated, religious affiliations you once listed and then removed, relationship statuses, locations, groups you joined and quietly left. All of it flagged, all of it filed, all of it waiting. Final rehook for this chapter. The next time Facebook shows you a memory, I want you to ask a different question. Not, look how far I've come. Ask, why this photo? Why today? Why now? And what changed on my profile in the last 72 hours that the algorithm decided warranted a reminder of who I used to be? Because that question is the beginning of understanding what is actually happening to 3 billion people every single day. You thought the spelling change was subtle, one letter, maybe a silent Y, maybe you dropped the second N, you told yourself it was a fresh start. Facebook's system registered it in 72 hours, not as a violation, as a data point. The Identity Continuity API isn't a rumor. It's buried inside a Meta developer changelog from early 2025 that accumulated fewer than 400 views before researchers started screenshotting it. The language is clinical. The implications are not. Here's what aesthetic drift detection actually means. The algorithm doesn't just log your new profile photo. It reads the lighting temperature. It reads the caption syntax. It reads the gap between who you're following now and who you were following in 2019. It is building a case. 3 bio changes in 1 month triggers what researchers are informally calling a continuity flag, not a punishment, something quieter than that. The system simply decides, and again, I cannot stress this enough, that you haven't changed that much. Bestie. And the emo phase photos? Every tagged image from 2007 to 2011 is still indexed, still cross-referenced. The straightened side fringe. The MySpace angle repurposed on Facebook. The band tee you definitely still own but will never admit. The algorithm remembers. The algorithm has opinions. But here's where it stops being abstract. That archive, the one cross-referencing your current aesthetic against 847 tagged photos from your most formative and arguably least photogenic years, it has a name. Meta never announced it. It appears in no press release. You've never been asked to opt in. 3 billion users are carrying a hidden folder inside their current profile. The contents are time-stamped. The contents are specific. And somewhere inside Meta's infrastructure, that folder is actively being updated every time you try to become someone new. The folder doesn't have a consumer-facing label. But in internal documentation reviewed by researchers, it appears under a directory path that translates, roughly and uncomfortably, to a record of who you were before you developed the opinions you currently perform. And inside that folder, time-stamped, organized, and apparently considered algorithmically relevant to your identity today, evidence that you once listed your relationship status as "it's complicated with a concept," that you quoted lyrics in your About section, that you checked in at a place called The Void, lol. The researchers who found this aren't fringe. One is a former platform integrity engineer. Another spent 4 years inside Meta's data governance team. They're not claiming conspiracy. They're claiming something more unsettling, that this is all working exactly as designed. Because the architecture was never built to help you become who you are now. It was built to retain who you were when you first handed over your data. The rebrand is not what the platform was optimized for. The original you is a more stable data asset. The question is no longer whether Facebook knows who you used to be. The question is what it's doing with that information every single time you try to leave that version of yourself behind. And why the timing always feels just personal enough to be uncomfortable. Chapter 2. The folder they never told 3 billion people about. Let that number sit with you for a second. 3 billion people. And not one of them received a notification that said, "We've been keeping receipts." Sources who've spent serious time inside Meta's API documentation, and we're talking people whose job it is to read the fine print nobody reads, started noticing behavioral clustering around what they're calling identity change thresholds. Change your name spelling, rewrite your bio, update your profile picture. Do it enough times in a short window and something triggers. What triggers is being described informally, and the informality of this is itself telling because nobody at Meta is putting this in writing publicly as a hidden folder, a compiled dossier, a before file, and the reported name circulating in data privacy circles, who you were before you got opinions. That's not my language. That's the energy of what's being described by people who've seen the structure. Inside, reportedly, cached versions of every bio you've written. Not the current one, the ones you deleted. The one from 2011 where you listed 3 TV shows as your entire personality. The one from 2017 where you described yourself using a word you would genuinely cringe at today. All of it. Time-stamped, organized, waiting. And then there are the interests. Remember when Facebook asked you to list your interests and you just answered honestly? Because you were 17 and you thought the internet was a safe space for sincerity? Every movie, every band, every phase you thought you'd outrun. The algorithm did not outrun it with you. The algorithm kept it. Here's your rehook. And pay attention because this is where the story stops being funny. 3 billion people are currently operating under the assumption that when you delete something on Facebook, the version of you that posted it goes with it. The evidence says otherwise. The evidence says that version of you got filed. The tagged photos are what researchers keep coming back to, because it's not just your own uploads, it's photos other people tagged you in. Photos you didn't choose. Photos from nights you've reconstructed your entire self-narrative to move past. Organized chronologically inside a folder structure you didn't consent to and weren't told existed. Now here's the detail that broke through the data privacy community and started this whole thread. The suggested memory feature. You know the one. On this day, you're in the middle of rebranding, new username variation, new aesthetic direction, new bio that finally feels like you, and Facebook surfaces a photo from 2009. That specific morning. That specific photo. The 2025 Identity Continuity API. And again, this is language coming from people inside the documentation, not from a Meta press release. Cross-references your current aesthetic signals against historical data, your current profile picture, your bio keywords, your name as spelled right now. It runs a delta. It measures how far you've traveled from who you were. And when the delta gets too large, when you've changed your name spelling twice, updated your bio 3 times, rotated your profile picture in a single month, the system flags it, not as suspicious, as statistically significant, as evidence that the continuity between old you and current you requires reinforcement. Reinforcement, Think about that word choice for a moment. The algorithm doesn't think you've changed. The algorithm has 847 tagged photos, a decade of listed interests, and 4 deleted bios that say you haven't changed that much, bestie. And it has a memory feature with perfect timing and zero chill. 3 billion users. None of them got a terms update with the words identity continuity. None of them checked a box that said, yes, please build a parallel archive of who I used to be and surface it strategically. The consent architecture here is, and this is being debated seriously in data law circles right now, functionally non-existent. Rehook, the question data privacy researchers are now asking isn't whether this folder exists. The question they're asking is, who else has access to it? Because a time-stamped before and after identity file on 3 billion people isn't just a nostalgia feature. That's an asset. And assets have value to someone. We're going to talk about who that someone might be. We're going to talk about what a complete identity continuity profile is worth in a post-2025 data economy. And we're going to talk about the specific moment, documented, time-stamped, when 3 billion people listed exactly who they were before the world taught them to be careful about answering that question. They didn't delete it. They just stopped calling it yours. Every deactivated Facebook account from the last 16 years sits in what researchers are now calling the OG account graveyard. Not archived, not erased, just held at a frequency you can't tune into anymore. But the system still can. Think about the person you were in 2009. The username, the bio, the profile picture you'd genuinely forgotten existed. That data didn't age. It didn't move on. It's been sitting in a server room somewhere, perfectly preserved, waiting for the moment you decided you were finally someone new. Data privacy researchers, several of whom ask not to be named, have been circling a specific mechanism inside Meta's infrastructure for the better part of 3 years. They call it the Identity Continuity API. And what it reportedly does is not identify you by your name. It identifies you by your behavior, your digital gait, the way you type, the hours you're online, the specific mutual friends you quietly reconnect with on a brand new account. The system reportedly maps these patterns against the ghost data of every account you've ever deactivated, and when the signatures align, it doesn't ask for confirmation. It just knows. And here's the line that should stop you cold, because this is the rehook. The surfacing doesn't happen randomly. Sources suggest it happens with statistically improbable frequency at the exact moment you've begun a rebrand. New profile picture, bio updated 3 times this month. Name spelling quietly changed. The system reportedly registers the delta, how much you've tried to change, and responds accordingly. The 2025 Identity Continuity API didn't invent this behavior. It industrialized it. Before the API formalized cross-referencing protocols, the ghost data was largely passive. After, researchers describe a system capable of running continuous similarity scoring across 847 tagged photos, archived posts, and behavioral logs simultaneously against your current account activity, in real time. There's a folder. This is the part that sources describe with a consistency that's hard to dismiss. A non-visible directory that users cannot access through any standard interface, reportedly labeled in internal documentation as something translated loosely as who you were before you got opinions. It contains time-stamped evidence, and it is attached to your current profile right now. The time-stamped evidence isn't just photographs. According to sources familiar with the data architecture, it includes the pages you liked before you knew what they meant politically, the groups you joined and quietly left, the check-ins that place you somewhere you'd never admit to now. The system has assembled a complete prior self, and it has been doing so since before you knew to be concerned. 3 billion users. That's the current active base. Researchers estimate that a significant portion of those accounts are linked through the Identity Continuity API's cross-referencing to at least one deactivated predecessor. Most of those users have no idea that the ghost account still shapes what they're shown, when they're shown it, and how the algorithm weights their current identity against the one they tried to leave behind. Rehook, the question researchers cannot answer, and the one that should keep you up, is whether the timing is automated or curated. Because there's a difference between an algorithm that surfaces your past by accident and a system that surfaces it with intent. And the data so far suggests the latter is more likely than anyone at Meta has publicly acknowledged. Former platform engineers, speaking through intermediaries, describe what they called the nostalgia loop architecture, a design philosophy in which the highest engagement spikes came not from new content, but from confrontation with old identity. The algorithm learned early that nothing stops a scroll like your own face from 15 years ago staring back at you. And so the OG account graveyard isn't a bug or an oversight in the data deletion process. If the sources are right, it is a feature. A deliberately maintained archive of prior selves, kept just warm enough to be functional, cross-referenced just frequently enough to be useful, and surfaced just precisely enough to feel personal. Because it is personal. That's the entire point. The cliffhanger that Chapter 4 is going to tear open. Who decides when to show it to you? Because if the timing aligns with your rebrands, and the data suggests it does, then something or someone is watching for the moment you believe you finally changed. And they're deciding that's exactly when you need to be reminded that you haven't. Not yet. Not according to the file. Here's the full picture, and it matters beyond the drama, beyond the memes, beyond the cringe of seeing your 2009 self resurface uninvited. We are living in a moment where identity online is genuinely complicated. People change. That's real. That's valid. That's the whole point of being alive. But the infrastructure of platforms like Facebook was built in an era where consistency was considered trustworthiness. And change was considered suspicious. The Identity Continuity API, whether it's exactly what sources describe or something close to it, represents a philosophy. Your past self is always relevant data, always a reference point, always, apparently, a suggested memory, delivered to you on a Tuesday morning when you were just trying to post about coffee. And here's where it slaps different in 2025. 3 billion people are operating on a platform that may be running a parallel file on who they used to be. The who you were before you got opinions folder, if it exists in any form close to what's being described, is less a feature. It's a worldview baked into the code. A worldview that says, we built the archive before you knew you were building it. We saved the receipts before receipts were a concept you worried about. The emo phase photos, the scene kid bio, the name you spelled differently for 8 months in 2011 because you were figuring it out. It's all in there. And the algorithm cross-referenced your current aesthetic against 847 tagged photos and arrived at a conclusion it will not stop suggesting to you. The most unhinged fact of all? You agreed to this, somewhere in a terms of service document that was 47 pages long and written in the font size of a secret. You scrolled, you clicked agree, you were probably on your phone in bed at 11 p.m. trying to access something, and the wall of text stood between you and it. That's not a personal failure, that's a design outcome. These documents are not written to be read, they are written to be accepted. And what you accepted, potentially, is a platform with a longer memory than your own mother, and significantly less willingness to let things go. Rehook. Here is the real glow-up, understanding the system you are operating inside, because that is the only rebrand the algorithm cannot touch. The algorithm isn't rooting against your rebrand. It doesn't have malice. It has momentum. It was built to find patterns, and you, bestie, are extremely patterned. Every time you changed your bio, it logged it. Every time you updated your name spelling, it noted the delta. Every new profile photo is measured against the archive. Not because someone decided to track you specifically, because tracking everyone consistently is simply how the system was architected to function. And that distinction between targeted surveillance and structural surveillance is the conversation we are not having loudly enough. Because it doesn't matter if no human ever looked at your folder. The folder existing is the point. The architecture assuming you need one is the point. 3 billion people, each with their own archive, each with their own ghost, each one carrying the weight of a past self the platform refuses to fully let go of. The ghost isn't haunting you out of cruelty. It's haunting you because deletion was never really the default. Retention was, Storage is cheap, forgetting is a choice. And platforms have historically chosen not to make that choice. Because your past self is useful. Useful for targeting, useful for modeling, useful for suggesting memories. Rehook, the 2025 version of digital literacy, isn't just knowing your password. It's knowing what exists even after you think you deleted it. It's understanding that the rebrand you posted last Thursday exists in conversation with every version of you that preceded it, whether you invited that conversation or not. It's recognizing that platforms built for connection were also structurally built for continuity, and continuity serves the platform more than it serves you. None of this means you should quit. None of this means the platforms are irredeemable. None of this means your online identity is a trap with no exit. It means you should move through them with eyes open, understanding what you are feeding, what you are building, and what will be archived in your name. Rehook. The algorithm doesn't believe you've changed. And bestie, it has the tagged photos to prove it. The question is whether you care. And that question is yours alone. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos.